3 months, 9 deaths. Indian students are dying mysteriously in the United States. The latest is the case of Paruchuri Abhijit, who was found dead in an abandoned car in a forest near Boston on the 11th of March. Joining me in the studio to discuss this worrying trend are Mr. Robinder Sachdev from Imagindia Institute and my colleague Ajith Vijay Kumar. Mr. Sachdev, I want to start by asking you this. How worrying is this trend? 9 students dead in the last 3 months alone. Very mysterious circumstances. Ruling out the 2 suicides, 6 or 7 Indian students dying, burglaries, unaccounted for, mysterious murders. Do you think there's a conspiracy there behind their deaths?
Thank you so much. I mean, I would not think as to a conspiracy, but yeah, there could be a pattern behind these,
right.
And what could be the pattern? I think that's to be maybe investigated further. Is there a pattern of, the issue of race? That's one thing which comes to mind.
Right.
Or other than that, what? So, but yes, in a big picture, it definitely is a very worrying trend, I think, for parents in India, especially also. To see these numbers, these statistics. On the other hand, or on the one hand, there is a growing perception in America that crime is a huge issue.
Right.
And in fact, even the presidential campaigns are slugging it out. Trump is blaming Biden for it, and Biden is, trying to counter it. However, the numbers show the various, statistics with the U.S. Justice and the crime, databases have. It shows that crime is going down in America, right?
Right.
But there is something amiss. There is maybe a shift in the pattern that, crime in the cities is going down, but it's spreading more in the suburban areas and towards the rural areas. Whatever it be, that may be the overall pattern of crime or violent crime in the US. But I think for us, people of Indian origin and people of India, I think it definitely is a very worrying sign as to why is this happening. And one last point I'll say, in this other report which is out there, where perceptions are that crime is growing in America so much that it's become a matter of discussion in the presidential debates. One aspect to it is that, okay, maybe because of social media so much is being reported, so therefore people are under an impression that crime has gone up.
Right.
That's one other perspective to look at. But here, if we look at the numbers are very worrying for India, like about 9 students. And from that, small number of students who are out there, right? I mean, the student body of Indians in the US is not a large number whatsoever. I mean, out there about 500,400,000. So these numbers are definitely very, very worrisome.
Right. Ajith, you detect a pattern in these deaths. I mean, 9 student deaths, all of them in very mysterious circumstances, found dead, out there in, mugged. All of that, you detect a pattern in this, or is it just random, deaths that are being strung together?
Right, it's too early to find a pattern in this, but then the deaths are certainly worrisome. Primarily, one has to understand that the students who are going from here and moving to America, that allure of the American dream. And then you reach a foreign country, different culture. So I think there is this cultural barrier also that is also impacting or not, getting the students to seek help in the manner in which they should seek help there. That is one thing. And mental health, the youngsters, right, they go through a lot of mental stress. Particularly, when you are out there, you have spent so much money to be there.
That's right.
Right. And then if you don't have that kind of a support system, that also leads to it. And the second most important and the real worrying factor here is that this whole crime scene in US, right? So that is also something which is completely new to an Indian. Right. So you reach there and you see that there is this open gun culture there, and people are shooting people left, right, and center.
Absolutely.
So for them to understand in terms of the safety parameters or the safety standards in terms of how do you keep oneself safe is completely different in US and India.
Right, absolutely. And that gun culture is a very worrying aspect of that, Ajith, as you correctly pointed out. There's several of these cases where there have been, students have been shot. In fact, in Paruchuri's case as well, he was found.
I also want to point out that famous case of Janvi Kandula. So she was knocked down by a cop. And then he was let go of,
So just a few days ago.
And such cases also don't help.
Right.
At the end of the day, when it comes to the Indian community there, particularly the students,
yes,
right? So when they know that, or when they feel that the US system is not helping them,
yes,
come to terms with that whole change from India to US.
right.
So I think that is also aggravating the matters. But then it is true, premature to kind of find a pattern here.
Right.
But
right.
I think we should work on the background in terms of how do we sensitize our students who are there,
yes,
or who plan to go there.
Right, right. Mr. Sachdev, the MEA just recently released a statement where they said that 403 Indian students studying overseas have died since 2018 in the last 6 years. That seems to be like a large number, but that's spread over 6 years. And there's a very large Indian student population studying overseas. And Canada surprisingly tops with 91 deaths. It's one of the most popular destinations for Indian students. But the MEA spokesperson says that these numbers need to be looked at in relation to the total number of Indian students Canadian in studying in Canada. What would be your advice to the parents of these students, who are so concerned about the safety, the well-being of their wards in the US? What would be the rules of the road that you would kind of advise them to follow?
Thank you so much. It reminds me of a specific example which I can give you in terms of advice, as you're saying, and what
yes,
your colleague was just now mentioning. It came to my mind when he mentioned about sensitization. I'll give
yes,
an example. I used to study in the US, and along with my professor was an expert on cross-cultural communications. He was
right,
a world expert.
Right.
He used to give training to the US Navy and US Foreign Service people going to other cultures.
Right.
One of the assignments he got was by the Washington DC police.
Right.
The problem they had, the Washington DC police was, and more or less still is, mostly staffed by white officers, right?
Yes, yes.
Now in Washington DC, definitely you have quite a good number of black Americans also.
Right.
So the white officers would pull up, let's say, a black person for overspeeding or something, right?
Yeah.
And when the officer would approach this black person, there was a huge gap in communications.
Yes.
They are both speaking English.
Right.
But the African-American style of talking English is, very aggressive with gestures, non-verbal, and hey man, what man,
yes,
whatever that, right?
Right, right.
The white officer would think that this guy is threatening me.
Right.
And the white, as the exchange escalated,
Yeah.
and the white officer would take the first step, put him under handcuffs or, pin him
Yes,
down, etc.
restrain him, yes.
Restrain him, exactly. So that was something which the Washington DC police, narrowed down to, that they needed to do cross-cultural communication with
Right.
their white officers,
Right.
so that they do not mistake the verbal or non-verbal, signals.
Right.
So in a similar sense, when our students, for parents, for example, maybe out here, other than the fact that, of course, that everybody knows, look out at the, where you're doing your housing, etc., etc. That housing where you are is one topic.
Yes.
I would always say.
Right.
Because not to save money, don't live in some dingy downtown areas, right?
Right.
Or don't be too adventurous, which is advice which you'll give to any student,
Yes.
any kid going anywhere, right?
Right.
So be US and all. But this aspect, I think, of cultural sensitization could definitely be something additional other
Right.
than what is already being done.
Yes. Cultural sensitization is an important thing. Any other aspects that come to mind, Ajith, apart from what Mr. Sachdev just mentioned?
I think one important aspect that also needs to be looked upon very closely,
Yeah.
and worked on, is how can the universities help these students?
Right.
Right. So as mentioned by him, if these universities are placed in, say, suburbs,
Yes.
where people are not that much of have had contact with so many
Right.
foreigners, Indians coming in.
Right.
So I think the university should play a key role here in
Right.
terms of making the students understand
Right.
the local understanding of the place in terms
Yes.
of the go areas, no go areas, what to do, what not to do.
Right.
At least for the initial 6 months
Right.
to 1 year, I think if the students were to follow the kind of instructions being given by the university, I think that would also help.
Right.
I think these students, when they reach US, they suddenly have that freedom and become too adventurous
Yes.
too soon.
Right.
I think also that is also somewhere
It's
playing.
also a culture shock for many of the
Correct.
students, Ajith. I mean, if you look at
Correct.
the backgrounds, many students come from small town India.
Correct.
They've never seen this kind of, they're exposed to hyper United States.
Correct.
And many of them get caught up in this, unfortunately. But Mr. Sachdev, anything that the government of India you think needs to do? Is it alarming enough for the government to kind of either issue a statement or, you know, reach out to universities, as Ajith was saying, sensitize parents, students, remind them of the rules of the road, especially when you're in a foreign country. Is there anything that would come to your mind?
A great point. I think what one specific thing which can be done, which has come about in your
Yes.
points and the points of your colleague. See, each university has a public safety department.
Yes.
Like even in India also, you know, the university has its own, you know, internal security. And these public safety staff are
Right.
mostly guys who are on bicycles and they
Yeah.
are not armed. They are not
Right.
armed at all. That's one of the important thing. And they're patrolling.
Right.
Now, but this would apply to universities which are residential, right?
Right.
Because if kids are staying in some off-campus facility, that's a different matter. But within
Yes.
the campus, so what the government of India could ask, urge and nudge the US federal government and
Yeah.
through them the university education systems, they should, you know, put more staff in their public safety departments.
Right.
They should have more patrolling security guys
Yes.
out there, which would, you know, presence makes it feel that, you know, there is a law and order somewhere, so
Right.
to say. So
Right.
I would definitely say that could be one thing which could be done and which is a concrete idea that the
Right.
public safety departments of universities, especially maybe where you're seeing more of such violent incidents we are seeing
Yes.
or patterns, they should be staffed with
Right.
with a larger number of public safety officers.
Right, absolutely. Public safety department, that's a very, very interesting and an important point there. So Indian students dying mysteriously in the United States, there doesn't seem to be a pattern in these deaths. 9 of them reported in the last 3 months. But as my colleague Ajith and Mr. Sachdev mentioned, there is need for greater vigil, need to follow the rules of the road, especially for all those thousands of parents and students who dream of a better life, a better educational life in the United States. And that's a story that we'll be following very closely on the News9 Plus show. Thank you very much, Mr. Sachdev and Ajith, for joining us
Thank
this
you.
evening.
Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.